Get around figure transformation. And what I want to just discuss real quick is really what happens to the whole body. As we get older, whether we're exercising or not, exercising helps keep the fascia moving, but also, again, kind of when we stop, our muscles start pulling, and that's kind of what happened to me. I realized is over the years, you got to understand the muscles are always constantly at a pushing and pulling, regardless of whether we're sitting, we're standing. Our muscles are always kind of working, and sometimes we end up getting, in all honesty, too tight, that it starts to change or alter the joints completely. Where it really starts the most is kind of through our midsection and our hips. And an easy way to kind of check of how much scar tissue is on there is, when you get in this position, how kind of soft is the glute, or how hard is it, as we hit the outside parts here. And with the percussion therapy, getting into that stretch position, we can start to loosen tremendously the amount of fascia on the hip, and then we can start to, if we need to, address the extremity issues. Because again, my hip controls where my knee's going, my knee controls where my foot's going to land or how it's going to land. I can alter it somewhat, but again, especially if I'm walking, my foot has to take the same angle as my knee. Now my knee could collapse, but my ankle's going to have to make up for it. And that's kind of what happens with our bodies throughout our lifetime is we just kind of keep making these compensations, one compensation after another. And we got to start to understand that we can finally actually move the fascia much better than kind of anything before. I've done massage therapy, exercise, and with the combination of percussion therapy and exercise, you can elicit huge kind of responses and changes in the body when understanding kind of what the muscles do, but then also understanding that the fascial lines don't really care too much about the muscles. Like I got a cable running literally from my glute all the way down to my ankle. Now there's no muscle that takes that whole line. I have my hamstring, but then it turns into my gastroc. But over the years, it had pulled in because I had injured this ankle so many times. And finally, now I understand that I can fix that. I can stretch the tissue out. I first had to start with the hip, get the hip into a better position so that my leg could land in a better position. Now that my legs femur's taking a better angle, now I can start to loosen up the tissue. The hard part's going to be, in and around the ankle because of how tight the tissue ends up getting and how much of a beating it takes over the years. But same thing can happen with the upper body. If I start to loosen my fascia here, I can start to stretch better, I get better hip mobility, and then I can start working underneath here, my lats, my pecs, my shoulders, to get my shoulders sitting in a better spot. All too often our shoulders are up here, and now my arm can't do the right angles because my biceps already at a shoulder position. I need to get my arm depressed and down and in order for these outer extremities, my biceps, my triceps, to take the right position. All too often our triceps are becoming extremely short because it attaches into the scapula here. And again, if my shoulders kind of tense like this, that triceps in a short position becomes hard as a rock. I was trying to figure it out for years why it was so hard to get certain people to strengthen their triceps when your triceps are much stronger than your biceps. But I realized that we're all working from a very short position. So, while exercise allows us to build strength, we're going to build strength in those positions. We might be able to alter them a little bit with certain movement patterns. And again, age plays a huge factor in this as well. It's different from when you're 20, and then when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50. And we got to understand that as we age, we have more scar tissue because we have more repetitive movements that we've learned over time. But if you watch some of the other guided videos in terms of how to loosen up the fascia and how to get it moving, mine is moving extremely every day. And now that I've added an exercise to kind of facilitate that and coming up with exercise to combat kind of my tightness and everyone else's as well. And once you start looking at it from those perspectives of the fascia being too tight, that we need to loosen it, we need to stretch, we can use the percussion therapy and then come up with exercises and movements. Martial arts is a great one to kind of understand and learn how we need these kind of bigger movement patterns to move when traditional exercise doesn't always get us into these positions. Maybe if you're dancing or swimming and things like that. But again, it all depends on how much you're doing it, how often you're doing it. All these things kind of really play a key factor. Again, even just kind of turning your head slightly for prolonged periods of time is going to shorten and tighten the neck muscles. And especially if you only do it to one side. I was doing it to my left side for years, and I realized all the tissue on the left side of my neck is really much tighter than the right side, because I was always slightly looking to my left, and these little nuances, popping a hip, all add up. And they're hard habits to break, especially if we're not doing anything to loosen. If we're just doing stuff to try and strengthen, it's really hard to break some of these bad habits because we take them when we go to the gym and when we exercise. So with a combination of these two, which is what I'm doing now, kind of anything is achievable. If you have more questions in terms of each muscle and kind of the areas of the body and how they reflect them, I've been trying to break it down as much as I can in terms of how the hip affects the leg, and then how the hip affects the back and the shoulder and all that. But if you want a better breakdown, just kind of let me know. Thank you.